Hello there, people. Since my trip to Bryant Park in New York City got canceled due to thunderstorms, I figured I'd make a comic book video. And the comics I want to show off today are CrossGen comics. I don't think in the entire year plus that I've been watching and making videos on YouTube, I've ever seen a single CrossGen comic pop up. I guess they're forgotten about. But CrossGen was a company in the early 2000s. I think they were around from about 2000 to 2004, 2005. And they put out a lot of good comics. Good comics you can find for cheap now. So if you're a key issue collector, you're out of luck because no one cares about CrossGen comics. There are no key issues. But if you just like reading good comics, there's a lot of stuff to read. Initially, CrossGen published 5 monthly comics. I think they all went up to about 40 issues, and I collected some of them. At the time, these are $2.95 comics, which 15 years ago was the top of the pricing for comics. So I couldn't afford them all, but I might have even bought them all because they were all pretty good. And what CrossGen was trying to do was they wanted to serve the market in areas where it wasn't being served. So they didn't want to do superhero comics. They wanted to do adventure comics, fantasy comics, sword and sorcery comics, whatever they could, wherever they thought the market was being underserved and people would buy things. So of the first ones, this is Scion #1. Which some real talent on here. Ron Mars and Jim Chung. Nice covers, nice everything. There's #2. This was, I guess, their sword and sorcery type comic. And they were all tied together by a grand concept, and they all took place in different worlds. But see this little CrossGen symbol up there? That's called a sigil. And so, like, this guy who's like in the royal family in whatever sword and sorcery world this is, all of a sudden he got this sigil on him which gave him superpowers. And that happened across a whole bunch of different worlds and universes, and nobody knew why. And it was going to culminate in some big crossover story years later, which almost happened but didn't because CrossGen went out of business before then. But Scion is a good sword and sorcery story about royal families kind of fighting each other, and one brother trying to take over from the other brother or some such, and a princess and a prince, but really good comic. This is one I bought. I have all the issues of, so I bought it monthly. Next comes one I didn't buy all the issues of, Sigil. This is I only have a couple issues of this. Once again, pretty good comic. There's a lot of Mark Waid and Scott Eaton doing that issue. This is more of a military adventure type comic. If I remember correctly, this guy was like a sergeant in the army or something, and they were out in space. There's a big space war going on between humans and aliens, and he got the sigil in this and became superpowered and used it to fight. No one knew what these sigils were or what they were supposed to be used for or what powers they even gave them. But this one, I want to track these all down someday when I get elected. Like I said, you can find these on eBay or something for cheap, so if you want good reading. And next we have Meridian. This is Barbara Kessel, Joshua Middleton, Dexter. This is the I guess you'd call this a fantasy one. Once again, it ran 40-something issues. I think this was the one that they were aiming at women more, because it's about a princess who lives in the sky in this castle. And nice book. I enjoyed this. Like I said, this is one I started at the beginning and bought all the way through. It may have been aimed more at women, but it was still a good comic, and I still enjoyed it. I think there was some royal family stuff going on in this one where she was trying to get her inheritance, and I think she got her own sigil. I can't even remember. I haven't read Meridian in a while, but I think she could heal with hers, if I can remember correctly. But anyway, it was a good, once again, the art in this is top, even the coloring, this is sort of, they were the first ones to really do digital coloring right. They did a really, very highly illustrative coloring. And at the same time where Marvel and DC were maybe struggling a little with their digital coloring, they did a nice job at it in CrossGen. And then another one, CrossGen was also one of the first to release everything in trades. Before Marvel and they released all their stuff in trades like clockwork. So if you wanted to just collect the trades, you could do that. But this is Mystic, Ron Mars, and Brandon Peterson. Once again, some talent on these. These aren't second-rate guys. These are first-rate guys making CrossGen comics. It's amazing to me how forgotten they are. But this was, I guess this was more Harry Potter-ish. And then I think this one took place. This is the only Mystic I have. I got it. It was okay. Once again, if I had more money at the time, I may have bought more of these because, like I said, $3 was the top of the food chain for buying a comic book in 2002. So it had to be my favorite comics in order to get them. And a lot of CrossGen was, but not all of them. But this one, good comic, Harry Potter-ish. I think she was a magic and a magic user world and fighting other magic users, all sorts of things going on. But I think this one also ran about 40 issues, one of the initial 5 comics of them. And the final one of the initial 5 in the wave was Crux. Once again, another one I didn't buy. This was the one I liked the least. It just didn't come together. It had something to do with these guys who came from Atlantis and the end of the world. And once again, some talent. Mark Waid and Steve Epting. I mean, those are A-level guys. But this one just didn't do it for me. But once again, I want to go back and get these and read them now. I want to get Crux and Sigil and the ones I didn't get. I'm going to have to track them down someday. Not quite yet because I don't have the money for them, even though they are cheap. But with them, it's easy to collect CrossGen comics, and they're all good reads. So, and then there was kind of a second wave, a couple of years later, which my absolute favorite CrossGen comic, and one of my, I'm gonna have to give this its own spotlight sometime, just because Negation is one of my favorite comics of all time. I just love this one a whole lot. It's, I guess you'd call it sci-fi adventure. This takes place in a universe that is run by this guy called Charon. And he runs the whole place. The whole universe is his. He runs it, does whatever he wants. And the first issue is a break on his... And this is the lead character right here. And he's the one without superpowers, but he's a good strategist. And he breaks out of a prison planet with a whole bunch of these other guys who do have superpowers. And then they spent, I think this series lasted, let's see, I wrote it down here, Negation, 24 issues. And the whole rest of the time, they're just trying to figure out what to do. They're flying through the universe, having adventures, trying to keep out of Charon's way, trying to figure out what to do, because how do you defeat a guy who runs a universe? You really can't. That was the problem they ran into. Even with their superpowers, Charon was so far above them that they mainly just fought his superpowered lieutenants along the way, but never him. And the sad thing about this series is after 26 issues, they started a new series called Negation War, which was finally the culmination of all this Sigil stuff that had been going on for years. And CrossGen went out of business 2 issues into Negation War. It was just like, because it was a 5-issue series it was going to be that wrapped up all of the CrossGen universe. And 3 issues short, we got nothing wrapped up. But you could see what direction it was going in a big battle with Charon with all the other Sigil universe people. But if you only check out one CrossGen book, make it Negation. And then we have, once again, this is the second wave of CrossGen stuff. The Way of the Rat. which lasted, let's see, 24 issues before CrossGen went out of business. And this could basically be described as a Jackie Chan comic. Chuck Dixon and Jeff Johnson, writer and artist, and he was kind of this thief comedy. It was serious comedy, running around the universe. I mean, running around ancient Japan or something. I can't even remember if it was actual ancient Japan or a Japan-type world. But it was a fun one. Not the greatest comic of all time, but a solid comic. It gave you lots of adventure, like I said, lots of sort of Jackie Chan comedy action going on. So that was a fun one. Always enjoyed Way of the Rat. And then, let's dig this one up. Sojourn. This was another favorite of mine. There's the prequel. It was this Ron Mars and Greg Land. Now I know a lot of people can take or leave Greg Land, but this is pretty much the only thing I've ever seen him draw, and he did a good job with this. Once again, she's the Arwen. She's the lead character of the series. There's a nice Greg Land cover. I like his too. This one lasted, let's see, 34 issues. And I think she got, did she get a sigil on this one? I can't even remember. It was her, her whole family was killed by these mean troll-like things. This is kind of a sword and sorcery fantasy one. By these evil troll-like things, and she's an archer, as you can see by her bow and arrow. And she wanted to get revenge on the leader of whoever it was who killed. Oh, that's right. It was the bad guy in this who had the sigil. That he got superpowers. That's how he was able to conquer his world. And because in this CrossGen world, sometimes good guys got the sigil and got superpowers, and sometimes bad guys got the sigil and got superpowers. So you never quite knew why anyone got it. It just happened at the beginning of. So she was. This whole story was her out to kill that bad guy who had the sigil, who conquered her world and killed her family. Once again, this is probably up there with as one of my favorites. Negation would be my favorite. This is another favorite. This would be in the stack of really good CrossGen comics. I enjoyed this one a whole lot. And also in that stack would be Ruse. This one also one day I'm going to have to give its own little spotlight on, because this is Mark Waid and Butch Guice. Once again, A-level talent. And it's a Sherlock Holmes story, that's, as you can tell there. And there was some tie-in to the sigil stuff, but not a lot in this one. But the Mark Waid, great job. Too bad Mark Waid quit this halfway through, but Butch Guice did the best artwork of his career, I think, on this. And it is just beautiful stuff. And what's interesting too was he did the layouts all the way across. So instead of reading the left-hand page and then the right-hand page, you read all the way across. And I've seen that gimmick before and it not work. I mean, I usually get annoyed by it, but he did it masterfully in here. It was just, you know what, I'm just going to open one up just to give you an example, just to show you. There you go. So every page you read across, and it's not gimmicky at all. It reads perfectly. His storytelling is beautiful. You're never at a loss for where to go. And it's just beautiful, beautiful artwork. So this is once again, this one is in the top of the CrossGen pile for me. If you're looking for something good and Sherlock Holmes-ish to read, check out Ruse. And then finally, with the third wave of CrossGen comics, we have stuff that only lasted a few issues. This probably all came out in their last year. First is Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Tony Bedard and is that Mike Perkins? Once again, A-level talent. And this is kind of a James Bondish story. sort of, you know, modern, suave. This only lasted what? Where's Kiss? 5 issues. So, you know, at the end they were putting out some really, they were really expanding their line and putting out interesting stuff before they went out of business. And this was a hot book for a brief period, El Cazador. Because once again, the Chuck Dixon and the Steve Epting art is beautiful in El Cazador. Once again, Steve Epting went on to do great work. What did he do? The Death of Cap? Something like that. But his El Cazador was absolutely gorgeous. This is a pirate story of a female pirate captain in, you know, I don't know, 1710. The art in this alone made it a hot book ever so briefly before CrossGen went out of business. Then we have Brath. This one lasted, what, 14 issues? Let's see here. 14 issues. This is sort of a... who did this one? Chuck Dixon, Andrea DeVito. What's funny about this one was I bought maybe the first 5 or 6 issues of it and just didn't quite do it for me. It's kind of historical fiction. It's like the Romans fighting the Celts sort of thing, only with some other stuff thrown in. It's not really the Romans. It's not really the Celts. And I stopped buying it. But then, I don't know how many years ago, 5, 6 years ago now, I picked up the rest of the series, like the 10 issues I was missing, or the 8 issues I was missing for like $1 a piece, and read the whole story, and it was okay. I mean, Brath is a solid story. Not their best, but still good. And then finally, for you George Perez fans out there, there's Solace, which was a, how many, 5-issue series, 6 issues? I can't even remember. I don't have the... But this is a George Perez drawn series. Really nice. Barbara Kessel, right? And George Perez? Yeah, Barbara Kessel, George Perez. If you're a George Perez fan, pick up this series because it was good. Once again, it was about some sigil bearer and the world fight. I don't know if this one ever went anywhere story-wise because it ended so soon. But how can you not like George Perez artwork? But anyway, there's a quick look at CrossGen comics. If you're, like I said, if you're a key issue collector, there's probably nothing here for you because there's no real key issues with CrossGen comics because nobody knows they exist. But if you like to read comics and you like a good variety in your comics, check some of these out. You can probably get them for cheap.